yeah, we got plenty of folks on. So, hey, welcome. This week is going to be sponsored by Bashir Asphalt Company. This was my, like I used to work as a guy that, would do the blacktopping thing. And this is my hat and a little bit of golf too. So today's hat, bringing it back from 1976. So back from a bin somewhere in the office. How's everybody doing? Everybody's okay? You guys feeling like me? It's like we just kind of, at least over the weekend, I had this feeling that I went from a sprint to a marathon, right? And it's like, oh man, just like tough. So, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but definitely feeling a little Zoom fatigue too. So, I would encourage all you guys to turn off the video and walk around and, like just do whatever you need to do to kind of stay safe. I'm sure this is like one of many.
I'm walking.
Thank you. Make sure everybody mutes too if they're not talking. So, because we're getting some feedback. Hey, so a couple things. I was just thinking about the call today and getting ready for it, and I've been thinking about this idea of why not, and I think that the world right now is divided into two kind of people, right? There are the why people, and they're asking like, why is this happening? Why doesn't my business model work anymore? And why do we have to sit on another Zoom call, right? And I always find these people that they're these why not people. The why not people are saying, why not reinvent my business model? Or why not rethink the way I work personally? Or why not, turn this negative crisis into something a little bit positive? So I've been looking for some interesting positive stuff. And who's caught this last week? Ryan. I don't think Ryan could make it from Communo, but he's been working with John Krasinski from The Office, doing this Some Good News. I don't know if you guys have been following that, but it's really blown up on YouTube. I think he described it a couple weeks ago. But this week, I know Steve and Ryan and I were talking. Ryan shot over a video of Some Good News happened from space with the astronauts. So it was really cool to see kind of that vibe, right? The positivity. And then last night, who listens to How I Build This by Guy Raz? Have people heard that podcast? Yeah, who caught the interview with Daniel Munn from 11 Madison Park? Did you guys hear that? It was on Instagram last night. And so Daniel has a 3-star Michelin restaurant, and he flipped a 3-star Michelin restaurant in New York City to a soup kitchen. He's serving 5,000 meals a day. So I want to play a little bit of this because I think it's so poignant. I'm just going to play into the speaker. Hopefully everybody can hear it. There's just like a little minute clip about why he did it.
I don't think the world right now needs to have honey lavender roasted duck delivered in fancy packaging with burgundy wine. That doesn't feel right for me. Yeah. And then I was at a loss. I didn't know what to do. So I went on some longer bike rides over George Washington Bridge. And just really thought about it and really listened to the voice inside of me. And I looked at what was in front of me. What are actually the possibilities? What can I do? I knew I had the contacts to the farmers and producers. I knew I had a kitchen. I knew I could cook, and I thought I had a team to bring into this. I knew I could probably raise some money. And I knew I had this, I'm on the board of a non-for-profit organization called Rethink Food. So with all these levers, if I would pull these levers, I could probably get something off the ground pretty quickly.
So I love that. When I was thinking about this meeting today, is like, here's somebody who's creatively using these levers to make change in the world, right? And I thought that was so appropriate for today's topic. I think in the last few weeks, so many of us have been talking about education and upskilling as kind of an imperative, right? If we've got all these folks, these millions or tens of millions of people that are getting furloughed and are unemployed, how do we help upskill? Like, how do the platforms and inventive organizations do that? So I think you guys saw the question I threw out there. So the question is, how do we address people's skills, get them upskilled, get them reskilled, as well as change curricula and teaching approaches accordingly? So hit me up directly on chat if you want to participate in it. I selected some folks to talk a little bit. I wanted to start out again with Chris Stanton because he's always digging deep in the research. And I love the way that he's kind of on it and turning things at HBS. So Chris, are you on?
Yeah, I am. And I was taking a little video break, but I think video is important for others to see you. So I'll turn the video on. This topic actually touches on a bunch of the back end of my class at HBS, which is called Managing Future of Work. And so we spend the last 4 or 5 weeks of that class thinking about some of the reskilling imperatives. And traditionally, this was taught sort of through or at least when I was planning this was taught sort of through the lens of thinking about a world where labor is scarce and we need to train people to take on jobs in tech or take on jobs that were going to be sort of immune from automation. And now I think the world has sort of changed, and there's an open question that at least my students have raised about sort of micro credentials or nano degrees from places like Udacity and the like. And so I'll probably keep my comments pretty brief today, but I think from the platform people who are on, it would be really fascinating to think about how the roles of credentialing and reskilling and upskilling kind of interact with some of the certification that the platforms do well, and whether there's sort of a pipeline for people to do on-the-job learning. Because if you look at Udacity's offerings, everything is sort of course-based, but then there is a project at the end. And I think some of the combination between project-based work where people get on-the-job experience plus content is likely at least where my students kind of came out who did projects on this. So I'll just provide some background there, which is post-COVID, we all went online, as I think everyone here has. And one of the things that we did was we pushed students to try to explore further. And many of them took on this question of how to reskill in a world where people were online and where jobs were changing rapidly. And so some of these suggestions around nano degrees or mini micro credentials through Udacity, Degree, or whatever kind of came up. So I know that's a long rambling answer, but I think bottom line is the role for some of these upskilling and reskilling types of programs needs to be combined with on-the-job experience, and some of the platforms who are on probably have great venues for thinking about that combination and potentially thinking about partnerships in this ecosystem. So I'd love to hear that perspective from those who are on, if you have chats or thoughts around that.
Yeah, that's great, Chris. Thanks. I would really encourage all of you, because I've had so many great conversations with a lot of the platforms and really interesting things that they're doing. So let's, anybody that has any really great ideas, I'm sure Chris is trying to rewrite his curriculum right now to capture some of the new ways things are happening. So I'd encourage you guys to reach out to him either in the chat or directly, and we'll make sure that happens. I wanted to turn over to Steve Rader, because Steve, I think you were kind of one of the very first weekly calls that we had a few weeks ago. You kind of threw this out, right? That was the original inspiration for this. And I love it from your perspective, because you've really been a champion of this.
Yeah, well, I'm super excited about the fact that you were able to grab Michael Verdict today, and I'm excited to hear more about that, because I really like what you're doing, Michael. Is I think at the heart of where people need to see upskilling and the future of lifelong learning. So I'm super excited about that. I did want to mention something that Mike Morris and I've been doing. Mike, you may chime in here if you want, but we got pulled into a think tank over the last couple of weeks, kind of headed out of some folks at NASA, but gathered kind of 50 folks from really around the globe, talking about how do we restart the economy? How do we kind of do good stuff to get the economy back and folks back to work? And in that, one of the things that kind of came out and dawned on me, and I thought I'd bring it back to this group, is we have a really a unique opportunity. This is a collection of a bunch of folks that are in the freelance, that really represent the freelance world, the platforms, the people are engaged in this. And so I wanted to throw an idea out there about how we can leverage this time to kind of build a more robust future. And I think some of you guys are already thinking about this anyway, so I don't think this is super original, but getting out there and encouraging the restaurants and a bunch of the folks to actually start signing up and getting corporate HR to signing up their folks on freelance platforms. If we had a system kind of in place where we could move people from one domain to another really quickly, we wouldn't have these big unemployment issues, right? Because we've got a bunch of restaurant folks that got laid off, but then Domino's needing 10,000 new drivers and grocery store chains. And I thought, well, gosh, all of our freelance platforms, they're all set up to pay people and to find out what their skills are and to match them up and credential them in a way that's acceptable. So is there a corporate offering that could be made by the freelance platforms to say, hey, look, restaurants and grocery stores and the rest, you guys sign your folks up on our platforms, and in the case that some big swing happens, we'll help you almost instantly find, if you're getting a dip in what your demand is, finding stuff for your folks to do so you don't have to lay them off. And at the same time, providing a way to quickly mobilize those folks in industries that need people. And you could even have it to where, if you're HEB or Kroger or some company, where you go and you train people on how to do the things you need in order to make that work and pay people to do that training. But that whole freelance network could be really built up through this, because a lot of people are suffering right now and trying to figure out how could we have prevented this. And if as a collective, we kind of put out a campaign that says, hey, there's a better way. There are platforms out here that are geared to actually match you up with the folks you need at the right times. There could be all sorts of interesting programs where this collective could make a real difference in building a robust economy the next time around. So I just throw that out there. I know a bunch of you guys are already thinking about this, but we got folks that are PR types that could maybe gin up a campaign. There are definitely folks, John Healy, I see you just put an umbrella over a bunch of crowds. Seems like this is right up your alley. Matt Berry at Freelance, I'm sure, Stephen Kestrel, Dean, I'm sure you guys all could maybe put your heads together on how we could make this work. So I just thought I'd use my 2 minutes for that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Steve,
Yeah.
I'd love to pile on. I know, Steve, we've talked a little bit about universal identity. That's actually a project we have officially kicked off at Top Coder. I know I've talked to a few other platforms, but we want to kind of build basically a universal identity that could be shared so gig workers could go from platform to platform. Excuse me. One of the ones we're talking to, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with economic modeling in MC. So they're basically a skill set data. So we're looking at importing all the MC skills. It's actually the new White House skills platform is based on that. So the idea there too is where you have to pay money is it actually will do job families. Like if you do this, you should do this to get to here. And it kind of maps out skills and how you build it. So we're looking at, kind of embedding the MC skills into our platform so that we can have a common identifier to track skills across platforms to rate people on, have people and share it across. And we're working with, who is it? Western Governor University, which I had never heard of before. But they're originally started by 19 governors, but they got 160,000 online students right now. So they're actually with the White House working on this now as well. So, it's a lot of effort on how to track skills, how to track skill families, and how to upskill people as they move throughout.
That's amazing.
Great.
Yeah, that whole idea of portability for freelancers, I think is going to be huge. So I love that you guys are doing that, but that. So thank you for all you're doing there.
Yeah,
and anyone that wants to reach out, happy to collaborate on that too.
Yeah, so that Dave Messenger from Top Coder, you guys should reach out, and if you're interested, just put it in the chat. Hey, let's go to Michael Burdick, because Steve referenced Michael, and I think what Michael's doing on Para is super cool. So are you on, Michael?
What are you doing? Yeah, I'm here. Can you see and hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
Awesome. So really quickly, in terms of background on Paro, really quickly, our platform, Future of Work platform, is for finance and accounting specifically. So high quality, Big Four subject matter experts, and we're empowering business professionals to pursue meaningful work on their own terms. So I want to take a step back and talk about upskilling and reskilling really quickly, because I think we have maybe a unique or possibly shared perspective with other people on this call. First off is like, what do freelancers and experts want, qualitatively speaking, in the freelance economy? I think that's an important level setting question. And a lot of it has to do with choice, flexibility, autonomy, and making cold hard cash as well. And so for Paro specifically, we think about the freelance economy as an opportunity for experts and freelancers to acquire new skills and upskill and reskill on a project basis, as opposed to the traditional sense of upskilling and reskilling in a traditional job is via a promotion. And so we think about it as a continuous improvement arc where every project you're either acquiring a deeper bench of characteristics and skills and outputs versus, or, you know, a deeper bench, or you can become a deeper domain expert. And so those are like the two key pathways that we're thinking about it. The hardest part about that is not making that choice, but helping freelancers who have never experienced the freelance economy before navigate that decision-making process. Because for folks like today, you know, we hear about all these furloughs occurring and people entering the freelance economy en masse. One example that I had the opportunity to work with Balaji at Deloitte as Marriott, they furloughed about 300 to 500 of their finance and accounting professionals. And these are folks that have never worked in the freelance economy before. And by the way, we've had to take a look at our matchmaking algorithm because hospitality is not exactly a skill set that's in demand right now. And so how do you think about pushing projects and opportunities in their direction where our matchmaking algorithm would not traditionally and historically tee them up for an additional project? And so, you know, to John Windsor's point about the why people and the why, you know, why not use this as an opportunity? We're using this as an opportunity to rethink our matchmaking algorithm and drive additional demand to people that otherwise would not have gotten that opportunity.
Michael, this is Balaji. Firstly, thank you for what you're doing, and I'm sure there are many marketplaces on this call that are also contributing to that effort. So I want to thank them again. But a quick question on upskilling. One of the big issues, similar to the universal ID issue in freelancing, is the wild west of rate setting, where often there's absolutely no connection with your skill sets to what you're making. It often depends on how urgent it is that you want the project, and there are so many issues that go into rate setting in the freelancing situation, where you could be extremely highly qualified or you could have upskilled, but that doesn't guarantee that you get a higher rate. Like without that proportionality, how does upskilling actually improve the quality of life for freelancers?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I actually think about rate setting from a microeconomic theory standpoint. So if you look at skills and characteristic traits back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, yeah, the whole thing. It'll be curious. She wants to go out there, obviously, and look around. I think she's.
Oh, sorry. It looks like somebody hopped on accidentally. So I think about it from a microeconomic theory. So if you think about demand supply curves, wherever somebody has an in-demand skill that is not necessarily in high supply, they therefore can demand a higher rate. It's like pure microeconomic theory. And so Balaji, to your question around how do you make more money, it's by doubling down on the skills that are in lower supply that you have a high quality of. And that enables you to earn more money per characteristic or skill that you bring to the table. And so we're working on a bunch of algorithms behind the scenes to enable freelancers, give that data back to them so that they can invest in the skills that they can actually make more money off of. And so there's a whole bunch of data that we're aggregating on the back end to actually make that a forward-facing tool. Whereas today it's actually just part of our IP and our matchmaking process today.
Sorry about that. I had my mute on. Thanks, Michael, that's really great stuff. If anybody wants to connect with Michael, he's doing some really cool stuff, and just hit him up on the, like I said, on the chat. And I'd love to turn it over to Simon, over in the UK. I know he's working with Alan Brown. I hope Alan was able to stay on. And Alan Brown is a professor also with the Digital Economy Foundation. Simon, you want to talk a little bit about what you guys are up to and thinking in the upskilling area?
Sure. So Alan had to drop. He's judging a hackathon or something, and like right now, basically. So he was listening, intrigued. He joined just as you put your hat on and messaged me like, "What the hell is this call?" I'm like, "Roll with it. It's a good group." So he sends his apologies, but he's a good guy to connect in, I think, from the UK side in terms of things. So for those that don't know me, Simon Hill, I'm the founder and CEO at Wazoku. My focus is predominantly on platform side for open innovation, crowdsourcing, co-creation type things. But I invited Alan to come talk with me today, and I'll kind of proxy for him on the topic. We're kind of coming at this upskilling and reskilling angle from the leadership perspective, rather than necessarily from the kind of the volume-based deliverer of work perspective, if that's the right way of thinking about it. And Alan's perspective, which is a hybrid of academic and commercial side. So he sits on a number of boards, but also works within the kind of research and academic sides from a UK perspective. And is very focused on the digital economy, and certainly a lot of what we've been talking about recently is, in a post-COVID world, is there actually a seismic change that's happened or not for leaders right now? Right? We can talk about future of work, we can talk about future leaders, we can talk about reskilling people, but for guys that have got to run multinational businesses, multi-billion-dollar balance sheets and P&Ls, like, is there actually just a shift that's happening right now, and maybe already happened, that has changed the way that we need to think about leadership in and of our organizations going forward, which I think can be good for all of us, right? If it's done well, and can be good for the broader economy if handled well, but also could not, right? Like, these are the times when these projects either fly or they get cut heavily. Where risk either becomes open or it becomes very closed. And I think that in a post-COVID world, we might see a real divergence of leadership types. We've spoken about various podcasts, and there are, there's kind of wartime CEOs and peacetime CEOs, and you need to think about the leadership going forward and the ramifications for the wartime CEOs and the leadership styles that they bring with it for the types of work that we're doing. For the ramifications for peacetime CEOs and the businesses that they run and the approaches that they might take, and whether we have the requisite skills to balance this. And this isn't just a post-COVID world where we find ourselves potentially in a much deeper recession than we're used to, where we find new ways of working becoming a norm. But let's just assume we bounce in and out of lockdown now for a period of time. It's not a thought I want to have. But if that's more of a business norm, and I certainly think that we're not going to get back to business as usual, even if the economies in the US and Europe start to open for a good 9-12 months at least, then what does leadership style look like? What do the skills that we need to have look like? And so together with Alan and a number of other leading industrial and academic people over here, we've been putting together this a new foundation, a digital economy foundation. I shared the link previously, but I can stick it in the chat afterwards for anyone that might be interested. It's more UK centric, but I think some of the topics might resonate also with some of the work that's being done at Harvard and some of the other universities as well, in thinking about, how do we upskill leaders at this exact point in time to be able to effectively lead and give the organizations the permissions that they need to sustain changes in working going forward, and not regress us back 10 years, but actually catapult us forward a further 10 years. And I said in the call 1 or 2 weeks ago that one of my big fears was that we've moved forward and broken down some of the barriers of how we collaborate, and that it's become easier to get conversations, to do deals, to provide services to people on a handshake and on trust. But I worry that may not follow through into business as usual, the other side. And so how do we make this sticky, and how do we embed this in the ways of thinking? I don't have all those answers. They're more really questions to throw out there, but what we thought we would do was start this foundation. It's starting to gather some real momentum here in the UK, of a mix of academic, business, research, learning, and another things, trying to piece a kind of always on curriculum together so that people are evolving at a pace, and put it together as a fellowship, right? Which is maybe a concept that exists in North America, or maybe not, but it's sort of similar to this group, really, right? But it's very much focused on a future digital economy rather than the one that this might have looked like 3 months prior. What does this look like 3 months henceforth?
That's great, Simon. Thanks. I think that's a really interesting question, right? Is that we've been talking about upskilling and education from, the populace and what people need to do. But obviously, at the core of this is the strategic imperative of leadership, right? Like, how do we help leaders upskill? Because this is a whole new world. Hey, Perry, you're on the call, and I'd love to get your perspective. Perry's a great thinker, but also is at Unilever and has been doing some really great work for a while. And I see you on the call, but just dropped off a video. Are you still? Yeah, there you are.
Yeah, my cat wouldn't leave me alone, so I had to go feed her.
Totally get that.
But yeah, no, on the topic of upskilling, and I love what you guys said, because it almost feels like there's always a trade-off in companies to really for leadership to make those right decisions about, the efficiencies versus the resiliency, and really making sure that you're taking companies forward. And sometimes, we see that the decisions are, it doesn't make sense for the company, especially in times when where we are today. But a lot of the decisions, are changing at Unilever as well. And there's a lot of consideration of, how do we utilize our internal workforce to really, see if there's any way of maybe even cross functions, or utilizing the people that aren't as busy now in certain functions, and then leveraging to put them on different teams. So really, but one of the main things that comes up is about the skilling. So for me, I think there's a great opportunity to tap into the freelance market, where you could put teams together, and you could bring in, skills from the outside as well. So there's a level of learning that's going on for the teams, the internal teams, from what's outside. So to me, I think that's a great mix, where you can actually put teams together on certain projects and have cross-functional teams from internal, but then you can also leverage expertise from the freelance market to really be able to upskill even your internal workforce, and then that learning curve becomes so much less.
That's really great, Perry. How are you thinking about upskilling leadership to kind of, as Simon thought about it? I mean, is that a priority for you guys, is to think about the new skills that leaders need to have in this new world?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is always a consideration. And, there's always a lot of different kinds of thought and different ways of doing it. And there's always that experiment that's going on. And I think around these times, it's really, for us, it's more about, hunkering down and really making sure that we're supporting on the supply chain side. And it feels a little bit more tactical than it normally would.
Yeah, I love that. I just saw a note from Gavin that came across the chat on this idea of strategic agility. And I think that's an interesting, way to frame this, right? Is like, you need definitely for everybody on the team to be agile, for you, but to be agile working with outsiders and insiders and working in a new way. But likewise, there needs to be strategic agility at the leadership level as well. So that's great. Hey, John, you and I've been talking, John Healy from Kelly, you and I've been talking a bunch about, Galloway's article and the reframing of university. When I saw that, and actually, you reminded me of it last week, I reached out to the Chancellor, University of Colorado. So I'm having some conversations with them, just trying to help a little bit. And obviously Kareem and I've been working on some things at Harvard with Bharat Anand as well. But it seems like, there's so much interesting stuff going on out here. And I know it's a big concern of yours with how you're attacking the world with, all the support for, kind of temporary workers in both the university and the high school level. I mean, any thoughts on this?
Oh yeah, we've kind of hit two different things. One, we've hit this pathway of kind of the reusability and the sharing of people, and I think there's great stuff going on there, and the platforms are all coming up with some different things. I think the challenge there on businesses, and especially large enterprises, is their willingness to engage people in different ways. We're still stuck in a paradigm that we believe a 40-hour week or a full-time job is the norm. They actually call temporary work non-standard still, yet that's kind of a misnomer if you really look at what's happening in the marketplace. So one, I would just challenge anyone as they're talking with people to help put data and stats in front of organizations to help them understand, Google's running at 52% of their workforce not being FTEs of their organization. That's a big sea change, and we need people to understand that. So that would be one. The skilling, upskilling, reskilling, unskilling debate is a fun one, and I really like the reference, Dave Messenger, regarding MZ. They've got some really good data sets that are mixed in there in terms of breaking down the knowledge, skills, and abilities of roles that are there. But when we're diving into education and what's going on, we're finding it breaking down into two different areas. People are either going off because of passion, and I think certainly our platform business is becoming, you're hearing platform economy become labeled as the passion economy. So people are chasing things that they're just really interested in. They want to gain some knowledge. They want to then leverage the opportunity to work in that new area of knowledge and do things there. But then there's this other piece of, I need to gain some skills. I need to gain some things that allow me to be of higher value into the marketplace. And the part that has been the concern for us in this matching world, if you will, is back to standards and the idea of credentials and certification. There are still some areas where, welding, there's only one certifying body in the US to identify you as a welder. There was a day when a Cisco certification gave you everything you needed if you were going to work on the network side of things. But if I'm looking for a Python developer right now, what certifications and what standards are out there? And so the opportunity I'm seeing in the marketplace right now is for some people to come together and really rethink things. NASCOM is the place where I think they're beginning this journey most aggressively right now, whereas they're going to see a whole bunch of the call center workers go away. They were worried about it because of automation. And as they're looking at 15 million jobs going away there pre-COVID, the question was, how do we make these people reusable? And can they come together as organizations? Can the witch companies come together and agree on some standards so that the skills I get are transferable and they allow me to incrementally add value? So we don't have answers on this by any means, but it's one of the areas that we're trying to spend time with people on as we look at some of that training, and particularly because individuals seem to be paying for it themselves. There's going to be some partnership where companies are going to hire you right out of high school now, and they're going to send you off to training, and they're going to work through things and develop kind of their high potential programs one way. But we're still looking at the majority of education happening at the expense of the individual or their families. And so how we make sure that those skills that people get are transferable from one company to another is the area that's probably of greatest concern for us when we look at the market right now. I welcome any inputs there.
Yeah,
this is John. This is Balaji again, and I want to ask a question of the group. I mean, I see two types of companies right now, right? One is, of course, that are your furloughing staff. So again, when the mental health of a furloughed employee that is almost has lost a job, I want to be able to see if Dean from TopTal or Jeff from Upwork have any stats in terms of, all of them provide learning opportunities. How much has utilization of learning actually, has it gone up, or has it stayed flat, assuming that people now, furloughed employees, have a little bit more time? Are they actually utilizing it for learning, or is it, or are they not? Number one. Number two, it's also when we talk about upskilling for leadership, right now there are two types of people that are operating right now where I see when I talk to a lot of my clients. One is I've lost majority of my team because I need to furlough them. I have no time to breathe. I'm working 10 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours a weekend. For them, upskilling is not even on the realm of understanding. And the second is, I myself got furloughed. I'm an SVP of a department. I'm now furloughed, and I have 10% base income. The question is, how do you have this conversation about upskilling in a format that seems positive, in a format that makes it easier for them to say this is probably the right thing to do? And I feel right now I haven't seen enough messages going out saying this is a positive mental health experience versus this is just the right thing to do even before or after COVID. So if any data that any of the marketplaces have about their adoption or utilization of learning would be just good to see, is that actually playing out, at least from the worker level?
Yeah, that's great. Does anybody have any data on that? I know Chuck Hamilton said, 8 of 10 people he's talked to said they're taking some kind of course during the COVID period. I mean, it'd be really interesting to get to know like what's happening on that education. Are people, kind of self-motivated to do that? That's really great.
Since I got called out.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Go, Dean.
Yeah, so our one of the most tangible sources of education is certifications for us. So we have a partnership with several of the cloud providers, one of them being Amazon. Amazon's in high demand right now, AWS, and we provide certifications, pay for the certifications, time that it takes to take the course, et cetera, for our talent, so that they immediately get placed into work. And so these certifications are not just kind of aspirational things. These are things that are required to then go do the work that we have available for them and for our clients. The demand for that program, so it's kind of an internal certification program, has doubled in the last 4 weeks. So literally hundreds of our talent have requested to get certified in XYZ area for AWS Cloud, for example. So, we believe whether it's excess capacity or because now's the time to think about reskilling or adding additional skills. I'm doing a lot of creating movies and videos right now on the side, and I'm inspired because I'm at home to do other things. So maybe it's a little bit of that. But yeah, definitely significant increase in adoption or utilization of that program.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really interesting program. And Dean, thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Hey, Mike, I know you were jumping in there too. You got something to add?
Yeah, just some quick stats. So we're definitely seeing increased participation. We have a learning platform on Top Coder called Thrive. That's up 2x, so 2 times the amount of people are reading and participating in learning activities. Our single round matches, which we're kind of famous for, those are for fun learning activities. Those are up 180%. So there is a ton of more activity out there that we're seeing. I do have some general thoughts. That's just kind of platform stuff. We are, by the way, seeing some of that, like the people that are going into Thrive, there's a 25% lift from them getting into work projects. So it is working, right? There's some definite good signs of momentum that, hey, the people that are going in, learning a new skill set like microservices, that's increased by 25%, their conversion into actual work. So that's a good story. But I have a little perspective on the learning upskilling, if you don't mind if I take a minute, John.
Yeah, go for it, Mike.
So I think like one of the key things is providing opportunity to people through self-selection. And if you think about it, if you really think about this from if you look at like our environment, like this is my view of the world, but I think like traditional work, like assigned to a job, you have an assignment, you have a piece of work to do, is typically very limited to no self-selection, right? Like that's what you got to do and you got to do it. Sure, you can go out and learn stuff on your own or things like that, but it's hard to do. Then there's a chance of, job change or role change. And then maybe you have a chance to do some self-selection, right? you know, but usually people want to hire you for what you did in the past. So it's a very limited environment in the typical, you know, job scenario. So let me pause that for 1 second and then talk a little bit about, like, look at education as like a converse, right? Education, you go into school, at least when I went, and you picked a major, so you got to select that. And then you limited a little bit your amount of courses that you were able to work on from that. So it was a little bit limited, but at least you had more selection. But our new education, you know, like the online courses, the Coursera's and the stuff that we're seeing come out, and stuff that Chris mentioned, you get a lot more selection, right? You can pick your courses, you can pick your tracks, you can pick what you want to work on. You might be going towards a certification or a degree, or you might just be learning. There's a ton more selection. And I think the next jump of that is going to be like even smaller. Might not be a course, might be a little piece of a course that you can take. And maybe it's a fraction of a credit or a fraction of something to get to a certification. Like we're going to see more of that, which is like almost pure selection of what you want to do. Okay, now let me unpause the work side of it and then bring it back together. I think the opportunity for platforms is, how do you allow people, like a platform gives you the chance to really self-select what you want to work on, right? If there's units of work out there, you choose what you want to work on. Like, it is pure self-selection. And I think that's a huge opportunity for gigs and freelancers. And one of the reasons why they choose this route and are increasingly choosing it more than the traditional route, even before anything with COVID. But the opportunity is now combined together, that platform-based self-selection, right? I choose what I want to work on, and the ability to have pure self-selection and learning. Like, okay, well, because you're combining the demand together with the learning side. So I know that there's demand out here to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to go take a class on Coursera, and in a week, I'm going to learn a module that teaches me how to do that new data science thing. That is where I think, you know, is a huge opportunity for platforms. So just want to pontificate about that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I love that. I love the idea of removing the friction, right? Because there is a lot of friction with a 4-year degree. You get it in business, you get out, and then you start searching for a job. It's just a real disconnect. Instead of having, you know, skilled, you know, maybe education lasts a lot longer than the traditional way, but it's very much more building specific skills so you can be more flexible. I really appreciate that point of view. Thanks. And Dean, thanks. That was really good, you know, stats. And I love the way that you guys have built this into the system, right? So it's really a pathway, because I think that's a problem, right? When somebody gets furloughed or they've got a new career path, it's hard for them to find a direction. They know there's opportunity, but the idea of getting some skills and then getting placed at a high percentage into something like AWS, it's really great. Hey, Diane, are you still on the call? I'd love for you to lean in a little bit. You always have a great view of things, and, you know, especially with all the knowledge and the stuff you built at GE.
Yeah, thanks, John. So I think what we were seeing at GE in the past few years was just wave after wave of change, right? And that represented a tremendous opportunity and challenge for both, you know, the employees and the employer, right? How do you adjust basically enterprise grade workflows as you're trying to really reconstruct your total workforce? And so as these waves of restructuring were rolling across the organization, I partnered up with the HR team to design basically an education process for the employees that were being impacted, to help them understand the benefits and the implications of basically the gig economy, how they should be thinking about their options, their expanded options as they moved on from GE. And so I partnered with HR and introduced these webinars for the exiting employees, and they were quite well received. And a lot of these employees have now subsequently invested in portfolio careers. But I think, you know, this conversation about the portability of skills, the portability of a support infrastructure is absolutely critical. The concept of skills acquisition, I think in and of itself is kind of short-term and episodic in nature. I do think too that we need to be thinking about kind of cohesive learning systems that, you know, this concept of learning agility and learning efficiency and learning vectors, so that as independent agents, we can all be thinking about our own system for professional development over time, and in a way that can be evidenced, so that it is, back to Mike's point, people hire people based on what they've done. And so how can you develop that portfolio of evidence in a way that's portable and meaningful and credible, carries weight whether you want to pursue a gig or whether you want to pursue an enterprise employment opportunity. We need that credibility in the system regarding the not only the skills portfolio, the achievements portfolio, but also the learning agility of the candidate. Just a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, I love that, Diane. Thanks. That's such a great perspective. Hey, Balaji, how was your walk?
Oh, I got back. It was beautiful, but unfortunately, I couldn't go into my coffee shop and pick up coffee because I didn't carry a mask. So, so it was. I had to cut it short. But again, life is good. I mean, reflecting on the stats that Mike and Dean provided, I think I just think about it in proportions. Again, we talk about companies like Amazon and Walmart hiring people. All in, they probably are, the new hiring from the retail sector is about 500,000 to 1 million, where just the restaurant sector lost 8 million jobs. So I still don't see in those numbers the tremendous volume that we're expecting to see. We should be seeing a 20x, 30x increases and not 1 to 2x's. So I just still think that I think going back to Steve Rader's comment about it, maybe there's a way for all of the marketplaces to come together like a consortium and actually communicate to all the employers to say, we exist. These are all the ways in which all the furloughed employees are coming to us. All of the, like when Jeff from Upwork, I think the stat that I heard in week 1 after COVID was that you saw 67% increase in applicants on Upwork. Then is there a way to communicate as a common voice to all the employers that are specifically to the banking, financial systems, and government? We're saying we have all the temporary employees that you can access really fast so that they don't have to sort through this ecosystem of marketplaces. If there's a way to communicate to that, it solves the demand problem. I agree with Jeff from Upwork, at least in the chat, that we can take as many people onto the supply, but supply is not the problem. It is demand the problem. And is there a way to communicate as a common voice as all these marketplaces to say, this is where the best people are, and then we can serve your short-term needs as you're creating teams to serve the uncertain environment, which many cases is temporary. So is there a way to serve that? I think there's a demand communication that could come out from all of you versus individually.
That's great. No, thanks, man. Thanks. Paul, what do you think? You're always talking to people out there, Paul Estes, staffing.com, and always have a good perspective on things. I'd just love to get your insight. You're talking to people every day, especially in the HR talent side of things.
I love talking to HR people. It's like, it's a gift. I think, I spend my entire life advocating for the demand side. And I think, I have about 4 or 5 presentations next week, again, continuing to advocate for the demand side. And I think the narrative that I'm starting to use is we're finally, as large organizations or enterprise companies, overcoming location bias. And I have an article in Fast Company that I wrote about location bias, and I think companies suffer from that. And so I'm going to start trolling diversity and inclusion people, saying, hey, if you suffer from location bias, you actually don't have a full diversity and inclusion program. And I think that resonates with people as a way to increase demand and overcome location bias. The next thing that I'm going to start writing about is the organizational boundaries. Like, we've gotten over location, but we haven't gotten over the organizational boundary issue, which stops people from reaching out into the freelance marketplaces. And I like something that Mike said more as around selection, self-selection. The article that I wrote, Reskill or Die, that was on LinkedIn, John, I don't know if you can pop that into the chat, really was my aha moment when I started reaching outside of the organization. And I believe that reskilling happens while you work. And so when I started engaging with freelancers, I started getting a bunch of new skills that I wasn't getting inside the organization. And so when Balaji talks about, oh, my organization is going to reskill me, they may send you a LinkedIn Learning link, but they've also atrophied your progress by saying, oh, you can learn from these people inside this organization, and I will hold you captive to that. If you try to work with somebody else, man, that could be called moonlighting. You could break some rules. You could break some procurement, like all that ridiculousness that stops organizations from reaching out and using the platforms has to be addressed. And so, I'm going to continue to write and produce information. I'm talking to organizations like E-Trade and General Motors and many others to help open their eyes up to thinking differently about how they think of reskilling, because I believe it's an active thing. I do believe in credentials. I think that the certifications and credentials are a very important thing, especially for high skilled things like development or welding, John, like you said. But I think organizations owe it to their employees to allow them to interact and self-select who they want to work with so that they can get their skills up. And I think the freelance platforms represent that, right? I get to in one of the reasons I left Microsoft was because I could no longer self-select. I was handed a team of 100 people, not people that I would have chosen, not bad people, but I was dealing with HR issues for 50% of my day, and that's not what I wanted to do. And so I left because I realized that my skills were atrophying. I was getting paid good money, but my skills were atrophying and I wasn't, future-proof. I ran the risk of becoming irrelevant. And so I advocate that working with freelancers is active on the job reskilling. And like Dean said, I'm having to learn how to do video production now. I'm not, John's kind of stuck in Colorado. He's not on stages. I'm not on stages. Steve Rader's not on stages. And so we're trying to figure out, Dean and I, how to do the work that we were doing before, the advocacy work that we were doing before, now with video production. And if you think, at-home video production is easy, well, we've got 4 weeks behind us saying that we're not there yet. So anyway, I think that as platforms, the opportunity you have is to say that we do have the best and brightest. And by working with us, you're reskilling the people that work inside your organization and also bringing diversity and inclusion. I think those are the types of things that resonate with large companies. They don't want to be seen as not diverse and not inclusive. They don't want to be seen as atrophying their employees, and not reskilling their employees. And so those are the narratives I've found that resonate not only with HR, but with business leaders that are looking to tackle these problems.
Yeah, that's a great point of view. Thanks, Paul. Wow, what a session today, man. There was so much great stuff. I love the passion and the different points of view. Anybody else have anything that they want to add to the conversation? We've got about 5 minutes left, and then I've got some thoughts to wrap things up. Happy to have anybody jump in. No? Well, I think go ahead.
I mean, if you have 5 minutes, I think we should again always go back to what Karen's call from last week about mental health, and at least have a more comforting conversation about something else. I can talk about what I have been upskilling. I've been upskilling my chai game and my Indian food game. So would love to hear from everybody else. What are they upskilling? It doesn't have to always be professional. We spend,
I love it.
We spend an insane amount of time at home with our families. We should talk about that as well on this call for a few minutes.
I've been upskilling my hat game, digging way deep into the box.
I'm not sure that's upskilling though, John. So let's
we have to bring something different next week.
There's no certification for that.
Yeah, that's your hat selection certification. I love it.
Completely subjective.
Anybody else have anything?
I've been trained a Frisbee dog, Balaji. That's been my focus.
Frisbee dog. There you go. I love it. Well, I really I want to go back to Steve's kind of, idea, because I really love this idea.
Crazy rant is, I think, the word you were looking for.
No, it's great, man. I think it's awesome. And I think that's something we love to do. And I know Steve and Diane and Balaji and the OA team, meet a couple times a month just to talk about, where the whole market is. And it would be great to get this group a little bit more involved with, how can we take this forward, and how do we, do it in a way that takes friction, not only friction out of the system of education and upskilling and show that, the platforms are a place for all the stuff that we talked about today. But also I think with a clearer pathway, it also cuts down on the mental health wellness issues, right? Like if there's an easier way, if there's that less cognitive dissonance around what path should I do? How do I take advantage of some of these new tools, and how do I go forward? There may be some, opportunity there as well.
And John, I'll just add on, there's been some great points people have made. There is work to go do on this. It is not like out of the box, this is going to be great. However, right. The big opportunity I see for this entire community, if we really want to jack up demand for this, is get out there with the message that there are platforms that can help the economy in the future and even now. And these are these platforms, right? The onboarding takes a huge amount of time. And if you can shortcut that by having people pre-deployed on platforms, that's worth something. And companies may be willing to sign up where they never thought they would before, in a kind of, I'm going to sign up for some future date in case this happens. But once they do that, they may actually get more involved, right? It's the network effect. Grow the network and the rest will come. So I think there's a really big opportunity, because the supply side is really what's been suffering from this community, right? Freelancers are not being utilized yet. That maybe this is the big opportunity to say, hey, look, we have an entire collection of millions of people out there on platforms that could help make jobs real for people and income more robust.
Yeah,
so
I love that.
That was second rate.
I love it. Thanks. I think well, let's have some conversations. I'll make sure that this group is kind of engaged in a broader conversation about that. And let's take some action steps. I know there's some great creative minds on the call that come every week and really could help us crack this. So let's figure that out together. It seems like a worthy project, and I think it's something we've always been interested in. And there's a unique opportunity to really help the world and do something positive and help on the attention. I know there's been a lot of other thoughts on education upskilling. Jeff Davis was kind enough to send a note a couple weeks ago, and thanks, Jeff, for that. And I think this is much deeper, and we've got to continue to talk about this. So hopefully this will kind of be an ongoing topic and a way to approach things. One of the things I got feedback from last week was just the really fun little note that, or little thing we did with Ray. So Ray, thanks again for that really fun exercise last week. I was going to try to do it this week, but so many people wanted to talk about this really important topic, didn't get to it. So I think in the future we'll try to do that a couple more times, because I want people on the call to get to know each other a little bit better and create that kind of community as much as we can. And I encourage all of us, like I said, like Balaji did, is get out and for a walk, so we're not just stuck on the Zoom call during these calls, but we can kind of enjoy the environment and change the environment a little bit. So, all right, well, I think we're at our time. Thanks so much. Marcelo, good to see you on the call. It just popped onto the screen. Thanks again for everybody to be here, and really enjoyed the conversation. Again, I love this call every week. It's kind of my my mental floss. It kind of gets me going and really fired up about all the opportunities ahead, and really puts me in that kind of why not framework, right? The why not mindset instead of a why mindset. So really grateful to you guys, and keep it coming. But just keep shooting ideas for us on what we should cover, who else should come to the calls, what we should be talking about, who else should share what they're doing. This is a community, and it's all about just kind of going forward together. So thanks. Have a good weekend, and love you guys.
Thanks.